Good evening and welcome to episode 9 of season 2 of Can You Fix Nigeria Challenge. Tonight's episode is a monologue, and the subject I'm going to be covering tonight is the issue of gas monetization in the energy sector of Nigeria. Now, like some of you will already be aware, there's already a transition from hydrocarbon-based energy sources, oil and gas energy sources, to renewables. And the world, in fact, there was the recent COP 2028, which held in Dubai. And one of the main agreements from this discussion is to phase out fossil fuels at some date in the near future. But more importantly is the agreement that we're going to also use gas as the transition gas. Now, what do we mean by transition gas? The truth is that most people, most reasonable people are aware that it's almost impossible for us to drop fossil fuel fully at the moment. And we will need some time to be able to transition from fossil fuels until when we are able to bring the renewables up to speed. In today's market, fossil fuels and hydrocarbons still cover over 80% of our energy sources. So it's not something that we're going to be able to drop immediately. Like I mentioned, gas is considered to be the transition energy source. And today I'm going to be speaking very specifically on the issue of gas monetization. So what is gas monetization? Gas monetization is the process of bringing stranded gas to the market to provide power or energy. Now, this can be done in any of 4 or 5 major ways. We have gas-to-gas operations, gas-to-gas such as converting natural gas to liquefied natural gas, LNG, liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, or CNG, compressed natural gases. So that's a gas-to-gas conversion. It's a method of monetization. That's one method of monetizing gas. A second option is to convert gas to liquids. And this process is called GTL. For those of you who are process-oriented, it's a Fischer-Tropsch process. There's the option of converting gas directly to energy, to power. And that's what we do in an egg beam power station, for example, where we just burn the gas and at the end of the day, we're able to generate electricity from it. There's also gas to liquid, gas to solids. There are instances where people convert gases to hydrates for the purposes of transportation, which is then converted back to gas before we can use that. That's not very common, but it's a possibility. So the statement has been made a few times that actually Nigeria is a gas country, is a gas producing country that is wrongly focused on oil. That's because we have a lot more gas than we have oil. To date, it is said that Nigeria has over 200, about 206 trillion cubic feet of gas. That's 206 TCF of gas, of which 109 TCF is recoverable. Normally, when people assess these kind of wells, they have what they call P1, P2, P3. The Nigerian P1 for gas is actually 109, which is more than 50% of the gas that we have is recoverable. And that's a lot. In fact, that number puts Nigeria as the 9th largest proven reserve in gas across the globe. Having said that positive news, there are other things which we're not so proud of. Today, we're not recovering a lot of our gas, and of the little that we recover, actually, we are flaring about 30% of that gas. Yeah. So basically, I come back to what I've said earlier. There are several ways in which we can monetize our gas. LNG is a popular thing. The use of LPG, conversion to power, are some of the processes that we can use. The Nigerian NLNG, Nigerian LNG project or business, the Nigerian LNG business is one of the better LNG run businesses around the globe. Based in Bonny in Nigeria, There, we're converting a lot of our gases or our gas from several of our operators like Shell, Total, the NNPC itself. we're converting that to liquefied natural gas, and we're transporting that gas to countries in Europe mainly, but also in Asia, to be able to convert it back to gas where it is then generated, used to generate power. This is a fairly profitable business for Nigeria, actually. Our cost, I think at the last time I checked, we already have 6 trains at our LNG plant, and that's providing us with 22 million uh, uh, metric tons per annum, 22 MPTA. That's train 1 to train 6 at the Nigerian LNG. In addition to providing us 22 metric of liquefied natural gas LNG, the NLNG project in Nigeria is also providing 5 million metric of LPG, that's liquefied petroleum gas, from which you get your cooking gas. It's mainly propane and butane. So that's something that helps us to make a lot of money. As an example, the Nigerian LNG pays the Nigerian government between $1 to $2 billion in dividend every year. That 1 to 2 to 2 billion is because Nigerian government owns 49% of the Nigerian LNG project. So the question is, if we have a lot of gas and the gas project that we have done in Nigeria is being successful, why are we not doing more? Why are we not doing more? All right, I'll give you a bit of a background. I think it must be in like sometimes at the beginning of the 2000s, say 20 years ago, Nigeria produced 10% of the global LNG output. 10%. That was sizable. Today, we don't do so much. Today, our number has not decreased, but the problem is that so many people have caught up with us and they have overtaken us. So instead of doing 10%, which is what we did in about year 2000, today we do only about 4%. And that 4% is because countries like Qatar are now currently on 77 million metric a year. We are on 22 million, like I mentioned. They are on 77, and they are investing another $100 billion starting from this year for the next 4 or 5 years, where they will be growing their own output from 77 million metric to about 110. In addition to Qatar, who has grown a lot, in the last few years, Australia has basically gone from 0 to 81 million metric. So actually, Australia is a bit ahead of Qatar at the moment, and Qatar is responding to that to produce additional gas, additional LNG, so that they can reclaim their #1 position around the world. Another country that's done very well in the last few years on the LNG market is the United States. So the United States has really done well, and I think already they are #3 in the world. Today, Nigeria is dropped from a good position of being in the top 2, top 3. We've dropped down to about 7th or 8th. I mean, our number is not particular. I need to reconfirm our position now, but our position is not very good. Now, we can do more. Definitely, we can do more. But for us to be able to do more, it takes about 5 years, minimum 5 years to execute these projects, to bring this gas to the market. It's a big job. But it's not only the time that is an issue. Another big issue is the amount of money that we need to do to bring that kind of product to the market. I just mentioned a few minutes ago that Qatar is spending over $100 billion to increase their capacity from 77 to 110. So basically, to add 32 million metric to their 77 to bring it to the 110, they're spending about 100 billion. If you do a quick maths there, you're saying that give or take, you're spending about $3 billion per metric, give or take, rough numbers. Yeah, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money particularly for poor countries like ours. In addition to that money, it will take about at least 5 years for us to be able to bring that project to conclusion. But once we bring the project to conclusion, we'll be able to recoup that money in about 6 to 10 years, between 6 and 10 years, depending on how profitable our business is. So it's not a bad business to do. It's not a bad business to do at all. Like I said, we're getting between 1 to 2 billion every year. And recently, when we had a dollar problem in Nigeria, what President Tinubu did was he asked the NLNG to pay forward the shareholding that we're going to have over the next 5 years. And they paid us $6.7 billion just in one swap. So it's not a bad business to have. Now, the question I ask myself is, we've been in this business for a long time. Don't let anybody confuse you. Nigeria started talking about monetizing our gas in the 1970s under President Gowon, under General Gowon, actually. I think Chief Awolowo was finance minister at the time, and the first discussions we had was with Shell in the 70s to begin to see how we can monetize our gas. Since then, we've done a lot. We've done a bit. It's just that we have not been able to attain the position that we should have attained. So what have we done over the last 30 years? Over the last 30 years, we have done the LNG, like I mentioned. LNG started in Nigeria under, even though we have been discussing it since the time of President Gowon, the final decisions were taken in the brief period of Chief Ernest Shonekon as head of state, and President Abacha finally awarded that contract on around 1999, 1998, 99, 98, thereabout. And we have the LNG, which is 49% owned by Nigeria, and we've built that now from one train and there are to train 6, which is already operational. Nigeria is now building Nigerian train 7, which is a mega, what they call a mega train, because our previous trains were 2 MPTs or 5 MPTs. This is an 8 MPT train. So, and that's coming on board, which will take Nigeria's output from 22 million MPT to 30 once that comes on board in the next year or two. So it's something that we should be proud about, actually. We've moved the needle a little. We've increased our capacity by about 30% by adding just this one train to it. And I need to say kudos to President Buhari for taking the guts to do that, because when nobody was ready to fund it, at least he made that commitment for $10 billion to be able to go ahead with our project. So it's something to be proud of. The LNG in Nigeria has been very good. Nigeria has done very well with it. And if we are smarter, if we are smart people, this is the ground that we should be going. We should be doing a lot more with the LNG in Nigeria. The second thing that we have done, I mentioned that one of the other ways to monetize gas is to do a gas to liquid. So we have what they call the Escravos GTL in Nigeria, which is based in Escravos and off Warri in Delta State. Escravos GTL is one of only 2 major plants in the world. So Escravos GTL is one of only 2. The other one is Pearl GTL, which is based in Qatar. It's a monstrosity. The Pearl GTL it's a huge plant. But Escravos is the second largest in the world and is one of only 2. So that's another thing that Nigeria has done over the last 30 years to monetize gas. We've done well with that. That's another thing that we've done well with. And from the GTL, we can produce very good diesel. We can provide other things from that plant. It's another money spinner if we manage it properly. So we've done well with it. I'm just hopeful that in the years to come, Nigeria can also extend that, because it's another area where we have competitive advantage. We don't have competitive advantage in many things as Africans or as Nigerians, but at least this is one area where we have a competitive advantage because we have delivered this project. Before the Pearl GTL was built, we have already built the Escravos GTL. It's something that we have a lot of experience with. So it's something that we should be able to build on and not allow other people to come and overtake us, and then we're scrambling in the future. So the Escravos GTL is another good thing that we've done. The third thing that we have done is the West African Gas Pipeline, which is another way we have monetized our gas, which takes gas from Warri Delta and all across the Niger Delta, brings it across West Africa. We're selling gas to Benin, Togo, Ghana, those kind of places. I think that West African gas pipeline, I stand to be corrected, but I believe is already providing gas to 5 countries. And now there's an intention to take that all the way to Morocco and then cross over to Europe. So we'll talk a little more about that. That's another way in which we are monetizing our gas. 2 other ways that we are monetizing our gas is that we're using our gas also as input to petrochemical processes. So NAFCON, where we make our fertilizers, we are using blue ammonia in those kind of instances, and we're using that process to provide fertilizer. We're using it in the old LMA petrochemical, which has now been bought over by the Indorama guys. And Indorama has already added a second train to that. And recently, they made a commitment to President Tinubu that they're going to be putting billions of dollars again into the country to be able to extend that fertilizer plant. So that's another place where we're doing, or we were doing well in cold. But like I mentioned, the LMA petrochemical, which is now in Indorama, has been sold, and our NAFCON, where we used to use some of this gas as input for the fertilizer process, is also not working well. So if you take the Indorama out and you take the LMA NAFCON out, basically the gas monetization that Nigeria is doing is at the end limited to LNG, to the GTL, and to the pipeline. So I'm going to repeat what I've just said so that that's clear. I gave 5 examples in today's Nigeria of how we are monetizing our gas. We're monetizing through the NLNG. We're monetizing through the GTL project in Escravos. We're monetizing through the pipeline projects, the various pipeline projects that we have. We're using it as input at NAFCON and all the petrochemical plants that we have. But in any of all of this, but because we've lost, or we have at least sold the LMA petrochemical, which is now called Indorama, and we have and our NAFCON is not working very well. We are limited to only 2 or 3 outlets for monetizing our gas today. The sad news, really, is that when we look at those 3 outlets, we are monetizing only 1%, 1% of the gas that we are producing in Nigeria. So remember, our topic for today is how to monetize our gas. We have done some things well. Like I've said, our LNG is a success story. We can make it better. Our GTL is a success story. We have not been able to follow up on that competitive advantage. But the bottom line, there are 2 bottom lines that we need to keep in mind. We are monetizing only 1% of our gas today. This is the first thing. And the second bad news is that even the one that we're monetizing, we're also flaring 30% of whatever gas we're producing. Okay, so so it's not a great story. Our position could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot different. I remember in 2006, I was working for KBR in the UK. And I remember a huge another LNG project, which we were doing for BG and Chevron and a few other companies like that, called the Olokola OKLNG project. I remember actually I was a project engineer in those days, and I submitted the feed papers for OKLNG. It was one of the proudest days of my career. I basically submitted it for KBR at St. James's Dock in London for the OKLNG job. That was December 2006. This is December 2023. So 17 years later, that project has not been done. That project will have added about 20 metric to Nigerian capacity. That's on the OKLNG alone. In addition to the OKLNG, Nigeria also had the Brass LNG. The Brass LNG was supposed to be in Bayelsa State. It started with ConocoPhillips and all the other guys. It was a cascade technology. We had a lot of people who were interested in this. All of those guys have moved out now. Conoco left Nigeria, Equinor, Statoil, and all the other guys left. And what effectively happened was that they sold their stakes in that Brass LNG, which never took off. They sold it to Totals, to the Shells, to the and the other European companies. But these same companies own the NLNG, the 51% in the Nigerian LNG project. And what's not going to happen, let's be honest, is that those guys are not going to fund two projects simultaneously. They're never going to fund two projects. Yeah? Because nobody has the money. Nobody has 100 billion to be throwing around, $20 billion. Nobody has it. These companies don't have that money. And if they don't have that money, all that is going to happen is that they're going to look at where they have the best competitive advantage and say to themselves, we'll have better competitive advantage in LLNG, which is already proven, is up to train 7, it has over 23 ships, and is doing very well. Am I going to continue to put money in that place so that I can have an economic of scales and reduce my cost of production? Or am I going to go and put another 23 billion somewhere else where I'm starting from scratch and I have a lot of risk? It's just common sense. They will put more of their money into LNG, and the Brass LNG will not happen. So we had two big projects which we should have done. And I'm talking in the early 2000s. I'm talking 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. OKLNG stalled. We never got to doing OKLNG. And we never got to do Brass LNG. I think at the end of the day, the point I'm making is that our gas monetization policy is not working. And there's no bigger evidence of that than the fact that our position has dropped from where we provided 10% of the global output for LNG or for gas monetization in year 2000, year 2002, to where we are less than 4% today. And our position is going to continue to get worse because other people are adding more capacity. I mean, they're adding capacity at a much faster rate, at a much bigger rate than we are. So that's on the gas to liquid side. That's the gas to gas or gas to liquid side. What is happening on the pipeline side? Let's see what is happening on the pipeline side. On the pipeline side, there are quite a few big projects which are also going on in Nigeria. So I'm sure if you watched the last episode when we're talking about the financing of projects in Nigeria, I talked a lot with Mr. Sholakwe on the issue of the AKK project, which is the Abuja Kaduna Kano. And basically, what that project is doing, it's a $2 billion project, which is trying to bring gas to the industrial areas in Abuja, Kano, and Kaduna, all the textile mills, all the things like that, which will be bringing power to those in Abuja, Kaduna, and Kano areas. So the AKK pipeline is one of the things that we are doing at the moment. Again, I said kudos to President Buhari because of the decision to go ahead with the $10 billion Nigerian Train 7. Another thing that I think they did, Mr. Chimpre Silva was Minister of Petroleum under him, was that they had an agreement for the Trans-Sahar pipeline. The Trans-Sahar pipeline is a 4,000-kilometer pipeline, 4,000 kilometer, 40-inch line, which is going to bring gas from Nigeria across Niger, across Algeria, gather in Algeria, and it would ultimately land gas in Europe. They did a lot of work on that. The MOU was signed, but we have not made a lot of progress on it. They took the first step, and I'm hopeful that somebody else can continue to extend that work, which they've started. Thirdly, President Buhari was also in Morocco about 3 or 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I think. And he had the opportunity at that time to sign another agreement on the Nigeria-Morocco line. The Nigeria-Morocco line, which is going to bring us, it's a 5,600 kilometer line, 48-inch line, which will bring gas to Europe as well, but going past all the 16 West African states. So when we talk about the West African gas pipeline, I already mentioned that that gas pipeline is already covering Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, and I think it's already in Cote d'Ivoire. I'm not too sure. I need to confirm that. But then it will continue along the coast of West Africa for 16 countries until it lands in Morocco. And then from Morocco, it's going to cross over to Europe. That project is estimated to cost us $25 billion, that it will cost us $25 billion over the next 25 years. $25 billion, the commitment is $25 billion, and that the job will be completed within the next 25 years. So there were some visionary, there were some big ticket items which were agreed at a very high level, what people want to do. The question is, are we capable? Are we able to execute it? And if we execute it, what is the value? Let me be honest with you, if we're able to execute these two projects, and there's no better time to execute it than now. Why do I say that? Typically, you will see that I mentioned on both occasions for the both pipelines that the intention is to take that gas to Europe. Why? Most of the gas that comes to Europe, which they use during their winter time, is coming from Russia today. So you have the Europipe 1, you have the Europipe 2, which is coming from Russia, going through Ukraine, and is bringing gas to all of Western Europe. But like you know, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, there's a lot of problems between EU and Russia. So EU is actively seeking a second route, an alternative source for their gas. Their industry depends on it. And this is where African countries who have the opportunity, who have gas, have an opportunity. Nigeria, Algeria, these kind of countries have a huge opportunity at this time to deliver this gas to Europe. But that opportunity will not always be there. There's a window of opportunity. The earlier we deliver that gas to Europe, the better for us. The better for us, we can keep a slice of that market now that they're trying to diversify their supply. That opportunity may not be there 5 years from now. So if anybody in government or some people who are able to influence government people is listening to me or is listening to this discussion or to this monologue today, I like to encourage you that we should make hay when the sun is shining and get these projects delivered now. This is the only way we're going to be able to benefit. In 5 years, if EU and Russia are reconciled and everything is hunky-dory between the two of them, the opportunity will be lost forever. Because I'm sure that Europe will not make the same mistake that they have made now. They're not going to rely on gas from Russia going forward. What will happen is that Europeans will start building regasification plants. They will bring the LNG supply from the US or from Qatar and places where they can rely on. They will regasify in Europe and they will send it into their networks. Our opportunity, the window of opportunity for us to bring our gas to Europe is not always going to be there. All right, so that's on the pipeline. So we've talked about LNG, we've talked about what we're doing on the GTL side, we've talked about what we're doing on the pipeline side. I think when you look at all of what I've said today, we're not distinguishing ourselves in any area, actually. We're not distinguishing ourselves in any area. Our LNG is good. We had competitive advantage there, but we've lost our edge because we did not continue. Our GTL, we're only one of only two in the world at the moment, but it's not big enough right now. We need to continue to extend that to be able to take the competitive advantage in GTL. On our pipeline, we're only playing local. We're playing local. We're not started playing international yet, at least at a big level. We're not playing international like Canada or Russia and this kind of guys are playing. So We're not monetizing gas there. Okay, so then let's forget the international. Let's look at the local side. How are we doing with our own gas locally? Now, why is that important? I remember I worked with the team that delivered Gorgon LNG in Australia. This must have been in 2010, 2011, 2012. And the Gorgon LNG, which was a monstrosity of a project, huge project, huge project. But and they produce a lot of LNG. But in addition to the LNG that they produce, they did what they call dumb gas. What do they mean dumb gas? Domestic gas. They're putting a lot of their own gas in country. Why? Because the people in country can produce that gas, can purchase the gas, and pay them the money. So if the people in the country can buy the gas at the appropriate rate, they don't necessarily even need to export it. So then the question is, can we do similar in Nigeria? Is it possible? Is the local market good enough for us in Nigeria so that maybe our play should be domestic gas rather than exporting our gas? Okay, well, the truth of the matter is that before we can do the analysis, first things first is that we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing today in terms of local gas? So in terms of local gas, we've talked about the AKK line. Yes, it's going to be serving people locally in country. We've talked about the West African gas pipeline. There's the Escravos Lagos gas pipeline, which brings, again, gas from Escravos to Lagos. And I believe that line is actually tied, is the uptake for the West African gas pipeline, if memory serves me right. But in addition to that, there are local gas networks in Nigeria. For example, there's GasLink. There's been GasLink in Lagos since the 2000s. Yeah, GasLink has been in Lagos, and they are partnering with the Nigerian gas marketing company. They're selling about 130 million SCOF. Now, SCOF is standard cubic feet per day of gas. That's the unit in which gas is measured. About 130, and they're serving about 165 companies in the Lagos area, in the greater Lagos area. So companies like Cadbury in Agidingbi, Nigeria Breweries, who have those big plants around Lagos. These guys are getting gas to power their generators, their gas turbines from the local gas market. So we're doing something with GasLink in Nigeria. All right, I mean in the Lagos area. Shell Nigerian Gas is also doing something similar in Agbara. So if you look at Agbara is in Ogun State. So of late, what you will see over the last 10 years, that a lot of industries have moved out of Lagos and they've moved into Agbara in Ogun State. And what has been happening is that Shell is targeting those guys. They're delivering a lot of gas to those guys. They have about 138 kilometers of gas lines around Nigeria, Shell Nigerian Gas. They also have gas lines in Abia and in the Port Harcourt area, where they're serving about 100 customers with about 150 million SCOF of gas. The plan is to continue to increase that, and they will take it to about 300 customers ultimately. So overall, we have started doing some things. The question, though, is whether what we have done is big enough, yeah, and what is the impact? So I've mentioned only 3 or 4 states there. I've mentioned Lagos. There's something happening in Lagos, around the Lagos area, not the whole of Lagos, just mainly around the Lagos industrial areas, yeah, in Apapa or Agidingbi in Ikeja, okay? We've talked about the AKK, which they are building. We've talked about the Abia, in the Abia area, and Port Harcourt in Trans-Sahar area. And then we've talked about Agbara. Basically, we have not covered 0.001% of this country in terms of gas. So I don't think our domestic gas play is big enough yet. The domestic gas play is not big enough. Like I mentioned earlier anyway, we are only producing 1% of our gas capability. The last area to look at is to look at bottling gas, like the cooking gas that a lot of us are using, LPG, there are quite a few players now who are trying to increase LPG production and storage within the country. And that's something we can be happy about. Again, it's interesting that a lot of people are moving from wood and kerosene and they're moving into gas. It's a sign of development. It's something that we should be proud about. If it's possible for us to bring the cost of gas down, it will be very helpful because we will be able to make this available to more people. Look, we are better off selling gas at 5,000 naira or 6,000 and serving 10 million people than selling it at 12,000 or 3 times that price and serving only 1 million. It's a volume business. It's a volume business. And the earlier that our producers, our gas producers understand this, the better. Just to compare the numbers, if you look, I mentioned earlier that the Nigerian LNG, in addition to producing 22 million metric of LNG at the moment, they are doing 5 million of LPG. LPG is the liquefied petroleum gas, which you also use for cooking gas. So they are doing 5 million of that. And I think a lot of that they are exporting. But in the local market, they're also providing about 1.43 of that. So again, there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room to increase how much gas we're doing domestically. I don't think we're doing enough. Okay, next thing that is worth talking about then is where are the sources of this gas? Some of you might have heard a few weeks before, a couple of months back, I think it was in August 2023, there was a force majeure at Nigerian LNG, which means that they are not able to produce LNG product or gas, liquefied gas, to be able to satisfy their customers. It's not the kind of reputation we want for this very well-run company. It's not the kind of reputation we want for them. Some people have argued that part of the problem that we have now is that we're not producing enough gas. We're not getting enough gas to the NLNG itself. That even if we were going to do the OK LNG and the Brass LNG, where is the gas going to come from? Well, the gas can come from two places. There's what we call associated gas, which is the gas cap on top of our oil reservoirs. But the challenge that we're going to have with that is is stranded gas. They're in different fields here and there. And we were going to need a lot of big network to be able to collect all of that gas and bring it into a network so that we can then send it to where we want to compress the gas. If you look at today, how are we getting gas today at the LNG? Total will probably send gas from their Akpo field, from a Gina field. They will compress the gas and export to LNG. Shell has their own fields. They will compress and send it. So it's a lot of gas gathering and compression before you can get the gas to LNG, before we can then cool it and make it liquid before we can ship it out. So that's one way of getting the gas to the LNG plant. The other way to do it is to just go and look for gas field offshore. And I think Nigeria should be looking a lot more in this direction. Why do I say that? The issue of gas gathering gives us a lot of, because one, the gas is stranded. They are in so many different locations. And because they're in so many different locations, the logistics of getting the gas to where we want the gas is difficult. So this is number one. Number two, we have security issues with our pipeline. I did an episode on this earlier when we were talking about pipeline security. We are having a lot of rupture on our lines. We're having a lot of vandalism on our lines. It's not sustainable. And the companies are just not interested in building this network. It's too much of a trouble for them. It's too much of a problem. You build the network, spend billions to do it, then people go there and blow it up. So nobody wants to do that. And it's a lot of logistics problem. And so that's a second disadvantage of using this associated gas. The third one is that even when we have this network and people are able to collect this stranded gas, they will then need to compress it to be able to higher pressure so that they can send it to the long distance where it is. And they may need to be able to compress it in a number of places, not in one place, So there are several disadvantages of focusing on the associated gas alone. On the other hand, if we're able to go to our gas fields and produce from our gas field, the gas field will be a big volume of gas, and we should then be able to send one pipeline only from that place to the LNG. That big gas pocket will probably be offshore, which will also be easier to build a pipeline, and it will be more secure. So why am I saying all of this? I'm saying this that our strategy for getting gas to our LNG plant at the moment seems to be weak. We need to look at it in a bigger picture and then be able to take that gas and change from using associated gas, which is mainly located onshore, to looking for gas pockets which are offshore and is non-associated, because that's going to give us a bigger volume. It's going to cost us less logistics and compression, which we need for transportation, will be happening at only one location. Okay, so that's enough said about how we're going to get our gas. So what are the other issues then that we should be looking at? Our policy overall has not been very great. Our policy mainly in terms of the pricing of the gas and in terms of the ownership of the gas. What do I mean? Like I said, most of the gas that we're dealing with today is onshore, and they are difficult to reach. They are stranded gas. They are in local pockets. But what has happened traditionally in Nigeria is that when the government sells an oil mineral license to you or something to an IOC, what they do is that they sell the oil to the company, but the cap gas, the gas which is sitting on top of it to give you pressure, does not belong to those companies. Yeah. So government sells a oil mineral license to an IOC, but they exclude the associated gas. And because they've excluded this associated gas, those companies cannot sell the gas. It's only government that can, it's only Nigerian government and NNPC that can sell the gas. But please understand what this means. And this also explains why a lot of people are flaring and all of this. Because they don't own the gas pressure will go down anyway. So now they're not building a network to be able to collect that gas because it's not their gas, so they don't care about it. They can flare it. If they don't flare it, okay, I know that government is now putting a regulation that if you flare, you have to pay penalty and all of that. But sometimes it's better for you to just pay the penalty because it's so convoluted that the gas. You don't have a network for it. You don't have the compressor for it. You don't have the sweetening. You don't have the gas processing. I mean, it's so convoluted that in the end, you're just better off, okay, I pay the penalty and move on. So our policy on gas is not correct. It's not correct. It's not right. What we should be doing is that we should be selling the gas and the oil to the company, to the JV operator. That JV operator is then encouraged to provide the gathering network and send that gathering gas and everything to where we're going to need it. Because we ourselves as a country don't have enough money to be able to invest everywhere. I mean, well, I don't know how many fields Shell has in Nigeria. They must have at least 1,000 wells onshore in Nigeria, at least in the swamp, everywhere. So we cannot build facilities to 1,000 places and be collecting gas. It's not possible. At least we don't have that money. And that's why our policy on the ownership of the gas needs to change. The second problem is the issue of the pricing of the gas. So a lot of people have been talking about the play for the gas and asking the NLNG and the Nigerian government that rather than export, we should be trying to maximize the use of domestic gas first versus exporting the gas. But the question that the guys say to us is this, that the industry experts say to us: the price of gas locally is only 1/3 of what they can sell it abroad. You know, so if the local price of gas is only 30% of what they will sell it in the international market, and the amount of infrastructure they need to put is almost the same, then those companies will always try to put it into the international market because they get the forex for it, they have more revenue, they have more profit, they have more prestige. They deal with less regulation. So what is the incentive for them to do anything on the local side? So we need to understand this dynamic of the pricing also before we make up our mind on what our strategy. It should be considered as part of the overall strategy for monetizing our gas in Nigeria. There's something that is not absolutely right in the pricing of our gas as well. And you can see that also on the oil side. I mean, recently the Dangote refinery was ready to go, and they were struggling to get products to that refinery. So there are a few things that we need to look at in terms of our overall strategy for gas. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we're going to need the gas gathering infrastructure. When I mean infrastructure, I'm talking pipeline, I'm talking the compressor, and I'm talking a few other things. So if we were to take this from the scratch, then the question is, how do we go about it? How do we go about it? The first thing that we should be doing, as far as I'm concerned, is that we should be looking at the old gas play for Nigeria and asking ourselves, where is our competitive advantage? This is what the serious countries are doing. This is what Qatar is doing. Qatar says, I'm the number one gas producer in the world. I have 77 million. Then Australia comes from nowhere and is overtaking me. No, what do? I invest more money so that I retain my number one position. And therefore, I become the dominant player. I have the competitive advantage in that gas. So first thing that we need to do as a country is to look at where we are strongest in the gas play today. And without question, the place where we are strongest in the gas play today is in the LNG. We have at least 25 years good experience on managing an LNG operation in Nigeria successfully. And we should build on that capacity. We should build on that capacity. The Nigerian train is already up to 27. We have economies of scale in that place. We have some of the biggest berthing facilities in the world in that place. We have shipping lines. That company has its own ships. They don't rent ships. They have some of the best trading houses. They have capability in trading. So all of the competitive advantage that we need in LNG is already there. What we should do is to then drive home our advantage at the Nigerian LNG. I think this, for me, is the first thing that we must do in terms of monetizing our gas. Okay, so that addresses our competitive advantage. Now, but directly associated with that then is that, okay, but let's assume that I'm already on train 7, I need more gas. How am I going to do that? Then we need to go and look at the sources. And how do we address the source issue? There are two ways to address the source issue. Number one, policy. Policy of what we're doing with associated gas needs to change so that we can get more gas across from the producers, from the oil producers to our LNG trains in terms of associated gas. This is one. Number two, pricing. We need to see how much we're paying them for this gas, and we need to work it out because ultimately it will turn into advantage for us. Number three, we need to look at the location. And what do I mean location? Are we still focusing on onshore gas pockets, or we're now looking actively? Nothing happens by chance. We need to be looking actively for big gas reservoirs offshore, and bringing that gas as quickly as possible to our LNG location. So that's number three. That's I would say that's number two, A, B, C. We talked about about looking at our competitive advantage, number one. Number two, we have looked at, okay, how do we get gas to the place? Number three thing that we should then look at after we have done those two things, the next thing we should then look at is all the projects that we have. How do we address them? Let's be honest, we don't have the money to implement all of these projects. Okay, so if you look at the West African gas pipeline to Morocco, the line to Morocco, like I mentioned earlier, they're saying $25 billion for that. The Trans-Sahara one, maybe another $10 billion. So those two projects alone will cost us $35 billion easily. Okay, those are the two major pipeline projects. Okay, in addition to that, we have Brass LNG, which we have not funded. We have OK LNG, which we have not funded. We need to sit down. We cannot do everything at the same time because we don't have money for everything. So we need to sit down and redo the economics of the 4 projects, or those 4-5 big projects, and say which one is going to give us money quickest and where does our dollar go the highest. And prioritize in terms of what project we will do. We need to prioritize. We can't do everything. Please pick one. Pick one. Pick OK LNG or Brass LNG, or say to yourself, we are going to do the West African gas to Morocco, and stick to it. Yeah. And once we stick to one, deliver that one, then take the profit from that and then invest in the subsequent projects. But this idea that we are doing 3, 4, 5 things simultaneously when we don't have money is why we have not been able to finish anything. Like I mentioned, OKLNG, the feed for OKLNG, we submitted it in 2006. 2006, we submitted the OKLNG feed. Yeah, so please, that's 17 years ago. It's important that we pick one project and we stick to that and get it done. Lastly, like I've also mentioned already in this podcast, we need to build strategic partnerships. Germany, President Olaf of Germany was in Nigeria a couple of months back to come and see President Tinubu. They are looking for gas. Luckily, the Nigerian LNG was able to give them 0.9 MPTA of gas, of LNG, which is good. But it tells us that we can build on that relationship. Strategic relationship, what we should be negotiating with Olaf, with Germany, and all of these kind of guys now, is to say, look, we're ready to go. We will, if you help us to fund one of these LNG projects or one of these gas projects, we will then get the gas to you. They need the gas. They are the producers. They need that gas. We should just be building a symbiotic, a strategic relationship with these guys to say, look, for the next 5 years or 10 years, you will always be our first priority. We will get the gas to you. You just loan us the money to build it. Because if they loan us the money to build that project, I'm telling you, we will employ thousands of our people. Thousands will be employed. Thousands will be employed. We will develop skills in-house. We will have jobs, and things will change for this country. So that's me on gas monetization on episode 9 of season 2 of the Can You Fix Nigeria Challenge. I hope you join me when I go to episode 10, where I'll be doing a recap and a finalization of everything that we have talked about in season 2. Thank you and have a good evening.